I had always been someone who liked to take risks. When I first saw the ad for the medical study, it seemed like an easy way to make some extra cash. The ad promised great rewards, money, a chance to help medical research, and a simple procedure that wouldn't take much of my time. At first, it didn't sound like a bad deal. I'd be in and out in just a couple of weeks, no major commitment, and the pay was enough to make it worth my while. It was advertised as a clinical trial for a new medication, nothing too wild. They said the purpose was to study the effects of a new drug on people, and that they were looking for participants who were in good health. I fit the bill perfectly. I wasn't sick, I wasn't on any medications, and I had no reason to believe anything could go wrong. The idea of helping medical science, even in a small way, appealed to me. Plus, who wouldn't want the chance to make a little extra money without having to do much? When I called the number, everything seemed normal. The person on the other end of the line was polite, calm, and assured me that I'd be well taken care of. I filled out a quick questionnaire to make sure I was eligible, and after a brief chat, I was told to come in for the first appointment. I didn't think much of it at the time. I was just excited about the prospect of making a quick buck and moving on with my life. So, I signed up. I thought it would be simple. Little did I know, 2 weeks later, I'd be standing in the middle of something I couldn't explain. No one else could either. But before I get ahead of myself, let me tell you exactly what happened. Trust me, you'll want to hear this story all the way through to the end, because it's not what you think. The first day at the facility felt like any other trip to a doctor's office, just a little more official. The building was large, almost sterile in its appearance, with long white corridors and bright fluorescent lights overhead. Everything was clean, too clean if I am being honest. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic, and the quiet hum of the ventilation system was the only sound, aside from the shuffle of footsteps and the occasional cough. When I checked in, the receptionist greeted me with a smile and handed me a clipboard full of forms to fill out. Nothing unusual. I filled out the paperwork, signed the waivers, and waited for someone to come get me. It all felt very organized, very professional. They assured me that the trial would be simple and safe. I'd just be taking some pills and going through a few routine tests to monitor any side effects. Easy, right? Then, I met the other participants. There were a few of us, maybe 6 or 7. We all sat in the waiting area, making small talk, trying to make sense of what we had signed up for. Some were in it for the money, like me, while others were genuinely curious about the medical aspect of it. I remember one woman, in particular, who had a really bubbly personality. She told me she worked as a nurse and was excited to see how the drug would work. "It's for the greater good," she said with a smile. "We're helping science." I agreed, even though I wasn't sure how much my role in this was really helping. We were all called into different rooms at various times, where they took blood samples, did some scans, and gave us a pill to swallow. The whole process didn't take more than a few hours, and the staff were friendly, reassuring. I remember being given a bottle of water to wash down the pill, and the nurse told me to just relax and let the medication do its job. It was all so routine, so smooth. At that point, I had no reason to believe anything could go wrong. And then, we were all led to the same waiting room again. We sat together and chatted briefly before being told to go home for the day, with instructions to return the next morning. As I left, I remember feeling slightly odd, like something wasn't quite right, but I shrugged it off. After all, it was just the first day. It was probably nothing. But then, things started to get strange, and not in the way I expected. The first few days went by pretty uneventfully. I followed the routine: show up at the facility, take a pill, go through a few tests, and then head home. I didn't feel much different, maybe a little lightheaded at times, but nothing alarming. The doctors and nurses kept telling us it was normal, that our bodies were just adjusting to the medication. And honestly, I didn't mind the mild discomfort. I was getting paid after all. But then something shifted. On the fourth day, things started to feel off. It was small at first. One of the participants, a guy who'd been with us since day one, wasn't there. No explanation. I thought maybe he had an appointment or something, but the nurse didn't offer any details. It was as if he had just disappeared. I tried to brush it off, but a part of me couldn't stop wondering what happened to him. Then, it happened again. A woman, someone who'd been talking to me about her plans for the weekend, didn't show up the following day. I asked the staff about it, but they gave me vague answers. "She's taking a break," they said. "Don't worry, everything's fine." But something in the way they said it made me uneasy. Why weren't they being more transparent? I had a sinking feeling in my stomach, but I kept quiet. After all, I was here to make money, not stir up drama. As the days passed, the oddness continued. One by one, the participants who had been with me at the start were just gone. No goodbye, no explanations. They just didn't show up for their appointments, and no one seemed to care. I was the only one left. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence, but the longer it went on, the more I began to feel like something was very, very wrong. The staff, too, began to act strange. They were a little more distant, a little less friendly. They'd give me these quick, almost nervous glances when I asked about the others. And the medication? Well, I started to notice subtle changes in my body. My heart raced at odd times, my thoughts seemed foggy, and I couldn't focus on anything for too long. It wasn't like any normal side effect I'd read about. And yet, they told me it was fine. It was all part of the process. But then, I realized something that froze me in my tracks everyone else was missing. I was alone. Completely alone. And no one had told me why. By now, I couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in my gut. I was starting to panic. I had been the last one left in the facility for days, but no one had said anything about the others. No explanations, no apologies, just silence. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized just how eerie it all felt. I tried to leave, just to get some fresh air, but the staff wouldn't let me. I'd make my way to the exit, and each time, a nurse or doctor would intercept me, asking me to stay for just one more test. At first, I thought they were just being cautious, but after a while, I began to feel trapped. The doors seemed to close behind me every time I tried to escape. It was as though they were watching me, waiting for me to do something they didn't approve of. Then, one day, I overheard something. I was sitting in the waiting room, flipping through a magazine, when I heard two staff members talking in hushed tones just down the hall. I couldn't make out every word, but I heard enough to make my blood run cold. "They're going to start the next phase soon," one of them said. "We can't afford any more slip-ups," the other replied. "Don't worry, no one's going anywhere. The study's moving forward." My heart started pounding in my chest. I wasn't sure what they were talking about, but it didn't sound good. What did they mean by next phase? And why did it sound like they were trying to keep me hair-trapped? I couldn't shake the feeling that something was horribly wrong, that I had gotten myself caught up in something I shouldn't have. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the other participants, the ones who had disappeared without a trace. Were they gone for good? Had they left on their own? Or was something much darker happening behind those sterile, white walls? I had to know. I couldn't stay in the dark any longer. I decided to sneak around, to find out what was really going on. But what I uncovered, it was worse than I could have imagined. That night, I sneaked around the facility, trying to gather any piece of information I could. I felt like a rat in a maze, but I couldn't just sit back and let things unfold without knowing the truth. My mind raced as I tiptoed down the hallway, my footsteps muffled against the sterile floor. The lights above flickered faintly, casting long shadows along the walls. The silence was deafening, and each corner I turned made me more nervous. I knew the staff wouldn't be around at this hour, so I started looking through the offices. It wasn't hard to find unlocked doors. The facility seemed almost abandoned. The place had no life outside of the scheduled tests, no movement when the staff wasn't actively working. I went into one of the research rooms, hoping to find something that would explain the strange events I'd been experiencing. And then, I saw it. There was a file on the desk, with a label that caught my eye. Phase 2 participants. My hands shook as I opened it. What I read made my stomach drop. The names of all the people who had disappeared were in that file. But it wasn't just their names. There were details, dates, medical information, notes about side effects, and strange annotations. Some of the notes were completely nonsensical, filled with phrases like subject not responding as expected and emergency procedure initiated. And in the last line, my heart stopped cold. Subject number 7 must be monitored closely. Possible risk of escape. That's when I realized it. I wasn't just in some ordinary medical trial. I was part of an experiment where the others were never meant to leave. They weren't just missing. They were gone for good. Maybe they'd been eliminated, or maybe something far worse had happened to them. A chill ran down my spine. The next phase they were referring to? It was me. I had been targeted. I was their next subject. Panic gripped me. I had to get out. I couldn't be their next experiment. But when I rushed to the exit, I found it locked, completely sealed. I banged on the door, shouting for help. But no one came. I realized the horrible truth. I wasn't just a participant in a study. I was trapped. This place, this facility, was designed to keep me here. There was no way out. My mind was racing, my heart pounding in my chest. I was running out of time. The panic that had been simmering just beneath the surface for days now erupted like a tidal wave. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think straight. All I knew was that I had to escape before whatever was happening to the others happened to me. I tried everything. I checked every door, every window, every corner of the facility. It was like a labyrinth. The place felt endless, and every exit I found was either locked or blocked by some unseen force. There were no phone lines, no way to contact the outside world. I was utterly alone. I started to realize the depth of my mistake. How could I have been so naive? This wasn't some simple medical trial. This was something far darker, something twisted. The doctors and nurses, the friendly staff I'd trusted, were they part of it all along? Had they been watching me, waiting for me to make a move? Then, as if to confirm my worst fears, I heard footsteps. Light, deliberate steps echoing down the hall. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. I wasn't sure if it was just my paranoia kicking in, but the sound grew louder, closer. Someone or something was coming. I scrambled to find a hiding spot, ducking into a nearby supply closet. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. What were they going to do to me? How long had they been watching me? Was this the point of no return? Through the small gap in the door, I saw a shadow pass by. It wasn't one of the usual staff members. This person was dressed differently, darker, more serious. They were moving quickly, with a purpose. I held my breath, praying they wouldn't notice the door slightly ajar. I could hear them talking to someone, but I couldn't make out the words. It didn't matter. I had to act fast. I couldn't wait around to find out what they were going to do. I waited until the footsteps faded, then made my move. I had to find a way to contact the outside world, anyone. I couldn't be their next experiment. I couldn't let whatever happened to the others happen to me. I found a computer terminal in one of the back offices. My fingers trembled as I tried to unlock it. I didn't know if it would work, but I had to try. I had to send a message, anything, to let someone know what was happening. But before I could finish, the screen flickered, and the system locked me out. That's when I saw it. A security camera in the corner of the room, its red light blinking steadily. They were watching me, and now they knew I knew. I couldn't breathe. The weight of the moment hit me all at once. I was being watched. Every move, every breath, it was all being tracked. My mind was racing, and the room felt like it was closing in on me. I had no choice but to leave the computer behind. I didn't know what else to do, but I had to move, had to find a way to get out of this nightmare. I bolted from the office, adrenaline pumping through my veins. My heart was thundering in my chest as I sprinted down the hall, my footsteps echoing off the walls. I knew the staff would be on me soon, and that security camera? I was sure they'd already alerted them. I couldn't risk being caught now. I kept running, turning corners without thinking, hoping I'd find some exit, any exit. But the place seemed like it was built to trap me. Every hallway seemed to lead to another dead end. The walls were suffocating, the flickering lights casting shadows that made it hard to keep track of time. I had no idea how long I'd been running. Minutes, hours? It felt like an eternity. Then I saw it. A door at the far end of the hall. It was different from the others. There was no lock, no security camera above it. Just a simple metal door, slightly ajar. It was my chance. It had to be. I ran toward it, my pulse racing. My hand gripped the handle, and I pulled it open. What I saw on the other side made my stomach twist with fear. It wasn't an exit. It was another room. But this one was different. Inside, there were monitors of them, each one displaying footage from different parts of the facility. Staff members, patients, and me. There I was, on the screen, running down the hall, panicking. They had been watching me the entire time. I stepped back, my legs shaking beneath me. This was it. I had walked right into their trap. They had been waiting for me to find this room, and now, I was a part of something far darker than I could ever have imagined. Before I could react, a voice echoed behind me. "We were wondering when you'd find this." I turned slowly, my heart sinking. There, standing in the doorway, was one of the doctors, his face eerily calm. But behind his eyes, there was something cold or something that told me I was no longer just a participant. I was a subject. And that was the moment I realized I might never leave. His voice was smooth, almost comforting, but there was an unsettling edge to it. "You've been a very good subject, you know." He stepped further into the room, the sound of his footsteps deliberate and measured. Most people would have stopped looking by now. But you are different. I backed up, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The door was behind me, but I knew I couldn't escape that way. He was blocking my only exit. "What? What is this place?" I managed to choke out. My voice trembled, betraying the fear that was quickly consuming me. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "This is where we study the real effects of human willpower, of survival. And you, my friend, have proven very interesting." I felt a cold sweat break out on my skin. He wasn't saying anything specific, just cryptic words that sent chills through my spine. I tried to take a step back, but there was nowhere to go. "What did you do to the others? Where are they?" I demanded, though I could already feel the answer deep in my gut. The doctor's smile widened. "Oh, they're fine. Just not quite as resilient as you. We needed to know how long it would take for someone to crack, for someone to break under pressure. And you've lasted longer than anyone else." "Break? What are you talking about? You've been experimenting on us," I shouted, the anger rising inside me, but it was only met with his cold, calculating gaze. "You signed up for this, remember? You agreed to be part of something bigger. But it's more than just medication. It's about understanding the human mind, the limits of what someone will endure when faced with isolation, fear, and uncertainty." His words felt like ice, freezing me in place. I wanted to protest, to scream, but what could I say? How could I argue with someone who had orchestrated everything so perfectly? I'd walked right into their trap, and now I was caught in it. He stepped closer, his expression now one of amusement. "You can try to escape, of course, but here is nowhere to go. We've made sure of that." I realized then that he wasn't lying. He wasn't trying to intimidate me. He was telling the truth. This wasn't a medical study. This was an experimenta, twisted, horrifying game, and I was its latest player. Before I could respond, he turned and began to walk toward the door. "Don't worry, you'll see your friends soon. We'll be monitoring your progress closely. And just so you know," he added, pausing at the door, "the study is only getting started." I felt my stomach drop. I wasn't just a participant anymore. I was a specimen, and whatever was coming next, it was going to be far worse than anything I had already endured. I watched him leave, the door clicking shut behind him with a finality that echoed in my mind. My body trembled with fear, but more than that, anger. I had been trapped, deceived. I couldn't believe I was standing here, in this dark, twisted place, with no way out. I rushed back to the monitors, desperate to find some clue, some way to contact the outside world, but the screens were all locked. I could only watch as the footage of the facility's rooms flickered, each one showing the same pattern. The staff moving through their daily routines, the quiet halls, and me. My face was on every screen, my every movement being tracked, analyzed. I was just another test subject, no different from the others who had disappeared. And the worst part? I had no idea what was coming next. It was only when I turned back to the hallway that I realized something even worse. They had stopped hiding. I wasn't alone anymore. The staff were everywhere, watching me through the windows, waiting. They knew I had discovered the truth. I was their experiment now, and they were no longer pretending. The game had changed. I don't know how much time passed. It could have been hours or days. I tried to find a way out, but everything I did just led me deeper into their trap. Every door was locked. Every escape route was blocked. The walls felt like they were closing in on me, and with every passing second, I could feel my grip on reality slipping. They were watching. They were always watching. Then, just as I was about to give up, I heard something. A voice, distant and faint, but clear. "Help me." It was the woman from the first day, the one who had vanished. Her voice sounded weak, desperate. It was a cry for help, and it came from somewhere deep within the facility. I rushed toward the sound, my heart pounding in my chest. But when I reached the source, there was no one there. The hallway was empty, just silence. But then I noticed something written in small, scrawling letters on the wall. "Don't trust them. They're watching." The message was clear. And that's when I realized something even more horrifying. The people who had disappeared, the ones who had been here before me, they weren't gone. They were part of the experiment, just like me. Their voices, their whispers, and the walls were all a part of the trap. There was no escape. Not for me, not for anyone. And now, I know. I am next.